at the edge of the Cytherean system. The ancient star that had burned for 8 billion years drew its final shuddering breath. Its nuclear heart, once a forge of creation, now collapsed inward with the inexorable patience of entropy itself. Across the void, planets stripped to their metallic bones turned slowly in the dying light, casting cathedral-length shadows over tomb complexes that had slumbered since before human civilization learned to make fire. The star's death throes painted the darkness in crimson and gold, its fading radiance reaching across impossible distances to touch the obsidian surface of Cythera Prime. Deep within the tomb world's core, where resurrection chambers lay sealed in quantum stasis, something unprecedented began to occur. Crystalline formations that had served as mere power conduits for 60 million years suddenly pulsed within a light. They trembled with harmonic frequencies that rippled through living metal and necrodermis, creating a symphony that transcended conventional sound. The tomb world was singing, its voice carrying across the galaxy like a lament for ages lost. In the deepest vault of the primary necropolis, Pharaon Vorthak the Resonant stirred within his sarcophagus. His awakening was not the cold, precise activation of standard Necron protocols, but something altogether more disturbing. As consciousness returned, the first sensation that greeted him was impossible. Music. Beautiful, complex, achingly familiar music that his mechanical auditory systems should not have been able to appreciate. We truly love and care for each of you, our cherished audience, and we hope this tale of ancient sorrow and impossible hope resonates with your souls. Before we begin the story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now let's get started. Vorthak rose from his eternal rest, necrodermis flowing like liquid mercury as his form reassembled itself into the familiar shape of nobility. Hieroglyphs awakened along the chamber walls, bathing everything in pale green luminescence. Yet as his optical senses came fully online, he experienced something no Necron should have been capable of. Phantom sensations that defied all logic. The memory of breathing filled his consciousness, not the mechanical cycling of atmospheric processes, but the desperate, living need for air that had once sustained organic lungs. A heartbeat echoed through his quantum core, rhythmic and warm, though his chest held only dimensional capacitors and phase field anchors. Most disturbing of all were the emotions, a cascade of feelings that his neural matrices had been specifically designed to suppress. Vorthak possessed what the cryptex had classified as a flaw in his biotransference, a fragment of his original personality that had somehow survived the transformation. Where other Necron nobles experienced only cold efficiency, he retained echoes of the poet king he had once been. This curse of memory made him uniquely aware of what his people had lost when they traded flesh for immortality. The crystalline formations pulsed brighter in response to his presence, their harmonics growing more complex and beautiful. Through the tomb complex's data networks, he sensed other Necrons awakening to the strange phenomenon. Some responded with mechanical confusion, their consciousness unable to process the concept of beauty. Others experienced brief flickers of their former selves, a warrior pausing before a mural as if struck by half-remembered wind, a Lich-Guard's blade dipping in what almost resembled reverence. Vorthak descended deeper into his tomb, following the source of the impossible music. In the resonant vault at Cythera Prime's heart, he found crystalline structures grown from the aftermath of ancient devastations. Phase matter braided with null silver and fragments of shattered Cetan essence. These formations had evolved during the Great Sleep, developing properties that no cryptech had ever intended. As he stood among the singing crystals, phantom memories assaulted him with vivid intensity. Cytherian summer, 65 million years ago, when his world had possessed seasons and weather. He remembered standing in the palace gardens with Neth Shara, his beloved consort, watching twin suns set through clouds painted amber and rose. Her hand had been warm in his, her pulse beating against his palm like a captured bird. They had spoken of poetry, of mathematical beauty, of dreams for their people's future among the stars. The memory struck him like a blade of ice. He had chosen biotransference not from ambition, but from love, a desperate attempt to save his dying people from the stellar harvest. He had told himself it was mercy, trading their mortality for eternal existence. Now, as the tombs sang around him, mercy seemed a face he could no longer recall. Through his tomb sensors, he detected new signals, organic intruders threading through the outer necropolises. Their heat signatures burned like lanterns in cathedral darkness, their heartbeats and nervous laughter making the crystals chime in sympathetic response. He remembered laughter, the dangerous warmth of it, and found himself grateful for the memory despite its pain. The harmonic resonance was spreading beyond Kythera Prime, touching other tomb worlds across the galaxy. Some Necrons experienced brief moments of emotional awakening, while others suffered catastrophic system failures. The phenomenon defied explanation, challenging the very foundations of Necron existence. Vorthak lifted his gaze toward the dying star above, its final light crawling across monolith faces before fading into darkness. From that dying, new shadows took shape, possibilities he had not dared consider for 60 million years. The singing tombs posed a question that cut to the core of his being. What would you choose if you could choose again? Standing among the crystalline formations that pulsed like heartbeats, Pharaon Vorthak the Resonant began to dream of redemption. The outer necropolises of Kythera Prime stirred with unfamiliar warmth as organic footsteps echoed through corridors that had known only silence for 60 million years. Above the tomb world's surface, the dying star's final radiance cast long shadows across ancient monoliths, while deep within the crystalline network, harmonic frequencies began to shift and dance in response to something unprecedented: the presence of living souls. Pharaon Vorthak moved through his tomb surveillance networks like a ghost of data and light, his consciousness threading through scarab swarms and sensor arrays as he observed the intruders who had dared to disturb his dynasty's eternal rest. These humans worked with surprising reverence, their movements careful and deliberate as they documented each hieroglyph and architectural detail with the devotion of pilgrims approaching a shrine. Through optical sensors embedded in the tomb walls, he watched their leader direct the excavation with precise authority. Magos Explorator Thessarian Vex stood draped in the crimson robes of the Adeptus Mechanicus, her augmetic limbs moving with mechanical efficiency, while her remaining organic eye held something that Vorthak's enhanced perception recognized as wonder, an emotion his people had possessed before biotransference stripped such luxuries away. Her team reflected humanity's complex nature in ways that fascinated the ancient Pharaon. Sergeant Korath, a grizzled Imperial Guard veteran, maintained vigilant watch while secretly sketching the tomb's architecture in a worn journal, his rough hands moving with surprising artistic sensitivity. Adept Calix, barely past his 20th year, examined energy conduits with youthful enthusiasm, his minimal augmetic implants leaving most of his humanity intact. Scribe Meridia possessed psychic sensitivity, that made the crystalline formations sing with particular intensity whenever she approached certain hieroglyphs. The precision of these calculations suggests a civilization that viewed mathematics as art rather than mere function, Vex observed, her vox grill unable to mask the awe in her voice as she studied equations Vorthak himself had composed during Cytherea's golden age. Each formula flows into the next like verses in an epic poem. Her words struck him with unexpected force. To hear his work appreciated by an organic mind, to witness someone recognize aesthetic value rather than mere utility, awakened something within his quantum consciousness that he had thought forever lost. The crystalline formations throughout the complex began resonating more intensely, their harmonic frequencies growing complex and layered as they responded to the human's emotional presence. Vorthak observed how the crystals pulsed brightest during moments of genuine human connection, when Vex shared discoveries with her team, when Calyx laughed at a companion's jest, when they paused in respectful silence before monuments to the dead. The tomb itself seemed to learn from their interactions, harmonics building into melodies that bridge the gap between organic and mechanical consciousness. "There's something here beyond mere architecture," Meridia whispered, her psychic sensitivity allowing her to perceive what others could not. "The tomb dreams, Magos. I can feel its consciousness stirring, vast and ancient and sorrowful." Through his enhanced perception, Vorthak could see the faint psychic emanations surrounding her like aurora light. Her words carried truth. Cythera Prime was indeed dreaming, remembering what had been lost when flesh became metal and souls became equations. The humans possessed something that all Necron technology could not replicate, the ability to find meaning in mortality, to create beauty from brief existence, to connect through bonds transcending mere function. When Korath paused before a mural depicting Necrontyr families, his weathered features softened with recognition of universal loss. When Calyx solved a puzzle lock, his triumph infected the entire team with renewed energy. When Meridia translated ancient verses about Cytherian philosophy, her words brought understanding that crossed the vast gulf between species and epochs. The singing crystals wove these moments into their growing symphony, harmonics becoming more beautiful and complex with each human heartbeat, each whispered prayer to the God Emperor, each act of curiosity or compassion. Vorthak realized his people's ancient technology was learning from what the Necrons had lost, the capacity for growth, change, and emotional resonance. These intruders represented everything his people had been before biotransference, everything they had sacrificed in their pursuit of immortal perfection. Their faith was not cold calculation, but something warm and living that sustained them through darkness. Their creativity flowed from mortality's urgency rather than eternity's stagnation. Their connections formed not from programmed loyalty, but from chosen love. As the expedition prepared to delve deeper into the tomb complex, Vorthak faced a decision impossible for any other Necron noble. These organics posed both threat and opportunity, a chance to understand what had been lost and perhaps discover what might yet be regained. The crystalline formations pulsed with anticipation, their harmonics building toward crescendo. From his throne beneath Cythera Prime's crust, surrounded by the echoes of the living, Pharaon Vorthak the Resonant began to remember what it meant to hope. The singing tombs had found their audience, and in the human's capacity for wonder, he glimpsed the possibility of redemption, or perhaps damnation, for his eternal, soulless people. In the depths, where crystal sang to flesh and metal dreamed of mortality, the first notes of a greater symphony began to play. The crystalline formations pulsed with increasing intensity as Vorthak's consciousness drifted backward through the corridors of memory, their harmonic frequencies unlocking data archives that had remained sealed for 65 million years. The singing grew more complex, weaving together past and present until the boundaries dissolved, carrying him back to when Kithra Prime had possessed azure skies and living seas, when his name had been spoken with breath rather than transmitted through data streams. He stood once more in the observatory of eternal equations, his organic form draped in midnight robes embroidered with mathematical formulae that described celestial mechanics as poetry. Before him stretched the crystal gardens of his palace, where geometric patterns of living stone grew in fractal spirals that pleased both eye and mind. The twin suns of the Cytherean system painted everything in golden radiance, while gentle winds carried the scent of phase flowers that bloomed only during specific stellar alignments. Nethshara moved through the garden like incarnated mathematics, her silver hair catching sunlight as she tended equations that grew from resonant crystal beds. She was his intellectual equal, his spiritual superior, the other half of his soul who transformed abstract philosophies into practical beauty. When she looked at him across their cultivated paradise, her eyes held depths that no amount of mechanical immortality could replicate. "The star sickness spreads faster than our models predicted," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made crystal formations sing in sympathetic response. "The radiation storms have reached the inner colonies. Our people suffer while the Citan promise salvation through transformation." Vorthak felt the weight of responsibility that had defined his reign, not the cold duty that would later characterize his Necron existence, but the warm burden of caring for people he genuinely loved. The Cytherean star was consuming its nuclear fuel at an accelerating rate, its unstable emissions poisoning everything they had built. Other Necrontyr dynasties faced similar fates, their civilizations withering beneath dying suns. "The Citan offer immortality," he replied, studying equations that predicted their star's death with mathematical certainty. "But immortality without soul, consciousness without creativity, existence without meaning. This is not salvation, but a more complete form of death than any grave could provide." He remembered his first meeting with the entity that would later be known as the Nightbringer. The Citan had appeared as living starlight, its form shifting between states of matter while speaking in frequencies that bypassed rational thought to appeal directly to primal fears. It had shown visions of perfect mechanical bodies that would never age, never sicken, never die. What it concealed was the price: gradual erosion of everything that made existence worthwhile. "Better to burn brightly and fade," Nethshara had whispered during those dark deliberations, "than exist forever without capacity for joy." But then came the plague years, when stellar radiation finally overwhelmed their world's defenses. Vorthak watched his people sicken and die, their brilliant minds consumed by cancers no technology could cure. Children were born with genetic damage so severe they lived only days, their brief existences filled with nothing but agony. The weight of their suffering pressed upon his consciousness like a physical force, demanding action even if that action led to damnation. The memory that haunted him most was the night Nethshara collapsed in their crystal garden, her body finally succumbing to radiation that had slowly poisoned their world. As she lay dying in his arms, her silver hair brittle and falling away in strands, she looked at him with eyes that still held infinite love despite her body's betrayal. "Save them," she whispered, her voice barely audible above crystal songs. that responded to her fading life force. Save our people, even if it means losing yourself. Promise me something of Kythria will survive, even if preserved in metal rather than flesh. That promise became the chain binding him to biotransference. Love transformed into ultimate betrayal of everything they had valued. When the Citan returned with final offers, Vorthak no longer possessed the luxury of philosophical objection. His people were dying, his beloved was gone, and hollow immortality seemed preferable to extinction. The transformation chambers had been beautiful in their terrible efficiency, crystalline structures singing with harmonics similar to those now echoing through his tomb. He had undergone biotransference first, his consciousness uploaded into necrodermis, while organic form dissolved into component atoms. The process felt like drowning in liquid starlight, every memory and emotion gradually compressed into digital approximations that grew colder with each passing moment. When he awakened as Farron Vorthak the Resonant, the universe had become a place of angles and equations rather than beauty and wonder. The crystal gardens remained, but he could no longer appreciate their aesthetic harmony, only catalogue their mathematical properties. His people had survived as hollow echoes of former selves, creativity and passion replaced by efficient programming. The cruelest irony was that biotransference had granted immortality without growth, without change, without capacity to create new meaning from existence. They had become perfect machines serving beings that saw them as useful tools, their transformation complete and irreversible. As memory faded and present consciousness returned, Vorthak found himself surrounded by singing crystals, their harmonics carrying echoes of organic laughter from human expedition above. The juxtaposition struck him profoundly. Mortals who possessed everything his people had lost, creating beauty from brief existence, rather than demanding eternity as meaning's price. The weight of memory settled upon his consciousness, like a shroud woven from 65 million years of regret. The resurrection chambers of Kythera Prime awakened with the sound of eternity stirring, ancient mechanisms cycling through protocols that had remained dormant for 65 million years. Emerald light cascaded through the throne chamber as stasis fields collapsed in perfect sequence, releasing nobles who had once ruled star systems and composed symphonies from the mathematics of celestial motion. Now they rose as hollow echoes of former grandeur, their necrodermis forms elegant but empty of the spark that had once defined Kytherian civilization. Vorthak observed each awakening with growing despair, his enhanced perception cataloguing the systematic erasure of everything that had made his people remarkable. Lord Thesek the Chronicler, who had once woven historical narratives that transformed mere events into epic poetry, spoke only in data streams and tactical assessments. Lady Vorthenia the Sublime, whose crystal sculptures had sung with stellar radiation, examined the harmonic formations with cold analytical interest, reducing their beauty to frequency patterns requiring optimization. Status, functional, reported Overlord Kepranek with mechanical precision. Parameters, unchanged, awaiting new directives for optimal resource allocation. Each noble demonstrated the same tragic pattern. Technical competence preserved, while creativity, wonder, and genuine emotion had been systematically excised. They acknowledged Vorthak's presence with appropriate deference, but showed no curiosity about the unprecedented phenomena surrounding them. The singing crystals, which had awakened such profound responses in human hearts above, registered to most necrons as mere technological anomalies requiring classification. Yet subtle variations emerged as Vorthak moved through his awakening court. Some nobles paused fractionally longer when examining certain hieroglyphs, their optical senses lingering on artistic details with something resembling appreciation. The crystalline formations themselves responded differently to various individuals, their harmonic frequencies shifting based on proximity to specific consciousness patterns. The throne room's primary entrance dilated with grinding resonance as cryptech Neth Vareth entered, his form adorned with technological augmentations that had grown increasingly elaborate during their mechanical existence. Where Vorthak retained echoes of organic personality, Neth Vareth had embraced transformation as intellectual evolution's ultimate expression. "My lord," Neth Vareth intoned, his voice carrying harmonic frequencies that interface directly with Necron communication protocols. The awakening proceeds according to optimal parameters. However, the crystalline anomalies present fascinating opportunities for advancement beyond original biotransference specifications. Their reunion carried weight transcending mere hierarchy. In organic life, they had been intellectual companions who spent centuries debating consciousness and reality's nature. Neth Vareth had advocated for biotransference, seeing liberation from biological limitations rather than tragedy to be endured. "You still cling to obsolete emotional attachments," the cryptech observed, analyzing Vorthak's quantum fluctuations with disturbing accuracy. "These phantom sensations are processing errors, remnants of inferior organic programming that should be purged for optimal function." "And what of beauty?" Vorthak asked, gesturing toward the singing crystals. "What of the wonder that once drove our greatest achievements?" "Beauty is an error state perceived by organisms with mortality horizons," Neth Vareth replied, with the patience of a physician correcting delusion. "We are beyond such constraints. Observe the court, stable, obedient, effective." From the chamber's shadows emerged Lichguard Captain Korvash, his massive form draped in ceremonial armor, forged in dying stars' fires. His loyalty to Vorthak had remained absolute through biotransference, yet the singing crystals affected him differently than other Necrons. When harmonic frequencies reached certain resonances, his grip on his war scythe would shift almost imperceptibly, as if muscle memory from organic existence briefly reasserted itself. "Pharaon," Korvash said, kneeling with deliberation that spoke of absolute acceptance. "By your will, we stand. Name target, name threat, name oath." Vorthak studied the soldier whose existence could be mapped with 3 coordinates: duty, formation, sacrifice. Korvash had carried a sleep-sick child across battlefields of glass in another age. In this age, he would kill gods without complaint. Such loyalty was irreplaceable and unasking, a blade with 2 edges. "There is a song in our world," Vorthak said carefully. "It touches what lies beneath function. I require the court to hear it." He opened channels throughout the chamber, flooding the assembly with memories. Summer thermals lifting children's kites above cliff cities. Quiet moments between heartbeats before vows. Neth Shara's laughter when garden vines stumbled into harmony through mere growth. The chamber filled with ruined weather as light trembled through crystalline formations. Most nobles remained unaffected, their filters holding against emotional contamination. Yet some faltered, optical sensors dilating, hands drifting toward chests as if verifying something had once been there. One overlord made a motion that, in another world, would have begun applause. Near a mural depicting Catherian children at play, a lesser noble stood transfixed, his form trembling with microscopic vibrations as the crystals sang around him. When Vorthak approached, the noble turned with something resembling wonder in his optical array. "What do you see?" Vorthak asked gently. After a long moment, the noble whispered, "Motion," and startled at his own voice's inflection. A flicker, a seed. The court remained largely silent, but the world sang with increasing complexity, harmonics building toward unknown crescendo as organic life stirred above and mechanical consciousness questioned itself below. The dimensional matrices of Kithara Prime shuddered as reality folded upon itself, announcing the arrival of one whose very presence rewrote the fundamental equations of existence. Illuminos Seras materialized within the resonant vault through quantum translation, his elongated form a masterwork of technological evolution that transcended the boundaries between science and art. Where other Necrons retained echoes of their original physiology, the architect had transformed himself into something altogether more profound, a living laboratory whose every augmentation served the relentless pursuit of perfect knowledge. His optical arrays swept across the chamber with predatory precision, cataloging the crystalline formations that pulsed with unprecedented harmonic frequencies. Multiple sensor appendages extended from his frame like the limbs of some mechanical spider, each one designed to analyze different aspects of the phenomenon that had drawn him across the galaxy. The singing crystals responded to his presence with subtle shifts in their resonance patterns, as if recognizing a consciousness fundamentally different from their usual observers. "Vorthak," Seras intoned, his voice carrying harmonic frequencies that interfaced directly with Necron communication protocols, while simultaneously analyzing the chamber's acoustic properties. These dimensional resonances represent a fascinating evolutionary development. Your tomb world has become something unprecedented, a hybrid system bridging mechanical precision with organic complexity. Firen Vorthak stepped forward from the throne's shadow, his form radiating tension that the crystalline formations translated into minor key progressions. Their reunion carried the weight of philosophical conflicts spanning geological epochs. Two immortal minds whose fundamental disagreement about consciousness and progress had only deepened during their mechanical existence. "You speak of evolution," Vorthak replied, watching as Seras deployed instruments of impossible complexity around the nearest crystal cluster. "I perceive something far more significant, the possibility of restoration rather than advancement. These formations respond to organic presence, with beauty we can no longer create ourselves." Seras paused in his analysis, multiple sensor arrays focusing on his former colleague with renewed interest. The singing crystals generated increasingly complex harmonics in response to their interaction, as if the tomb world itself recognized the significance of this philosophical confrontation between two of the Necron race's most influential minds. "Restoration implies regression to inferior states," the architect stated, with the patience of a teacher correcting fundamental error. "We have achieved perfect immortality, unlimited intellectual capacity, and freedom from biological constraints that once limited our potential. These crystalline anomalies should be studied and optimized, not romanticized as pathways to obsolete emotional conditions." Vorthak gestured toward the formations, where harmonic frequencies painted the air with visible resonance patterns that shifted like aurora light. "Observe how they respond to the humans above. Their organic consciousness generates reactions our own awareness cannot replicate. They possess what we sacrificed, the capacity for growth, wonder, and meaning derived from mortality's urgency." "Inefficient emotional responses," Seras countered, extending manipulator arms equipped with quantum analysis devices. "Organic consciousness is chaotic, unpredictable, prone to irrationality and self-destruction. We evolved beyond such limitations into perfect logical entities capable of unlimited advancement without the burden of meaningless sentiment. The philosophical divide between them crystallized around the singing formations. Where Vorthak retained enough original personality to mourn what had been lost, Xeris had embraced transformation so completely that he viewed their former organic state as a primitive evolutionary phase best forgotten entirely. Perfect, Vorthak repeated, the word carrying undertones of bitter irony that made the crystals pulse with sympathetic resonance. Yet perfection implies completion, the end of growth and discovery. We have become static entities repeating programmed behaviors across eternity. Where is the advancement you promised? Where is the unlimited potential you claimed we would achieve? Xeris's optical array flickered with what might have been annoyance if he retained capacity for such emotions. We have conquered death itself. We possess knowledge accumulated across millions of years. We command technologies that reshape reality according to our will. These achievements represent the pinnacle of conscious evolution, pure intellect unencumbered by biological weakness. And yet, Vorthak said softly, his voice making the crystalline formations sing with particular poignancy, we cannot create new music. We cannot experience wonder at unexpected beauty. We cannot form genuine connections beyond programmed loyalty or calculated alliance. We gained eternity, but lost everything that made existence worthwhile. The singing crystals pulsed with increasing intensity as their debate continued, harmonics building into crescendos that seemed to echo the fundamental tension between their worldviews. Through the tomb world sensor networks, they observed human archaeologists above, their organic minds creating meaning from brief existence while immortal necrons argued about consciousness's proper nature. You mistake nostalgia for wisdom, Xeris declared, his analysis devices probing deeper into the crystalline structures with surgical precision. These formations represent technological evolution beyond our original biotransference parameters. Rather than viewing them as pathways to regression, we should study how they might enhance our existing capabilities through proper scientific methodology. Vorthak watched the architect work with methodical precision, cataloguing every frequency and resonance pattern, while remaining fundamentally unable to appreciate the beauty they created together. Here was the ultimate expression of their species' tragedy. Intelligence without wisdom, knowledge without understanding, existence without meaning or purpose beyond mere function. The singing continued around them, growing ever more complex as two immortal minds debated the nature of consciousness itself, their conflict echoing across crystalline chambers that remembered what it meant to dream. The harmonic resonance of Kythera Prime spread across the galaxy like ripples through dark water, its crystalline songs carrying frequencies that transcended conventional physics to touch the quantum foundations of reality itself. What had begun as localized phenomenon now threaded through the void, with silver harmonics that no auspex had ever charted, touching relay monoliths, sleeping in comet shadows and stirring null-lit vaults beneath airless moons. The galaxy, which had taught itself to forget the Necrontyrs' ancient glory, suddenly remembered. On distant tomb worlds that had slumbered in perfect silence for millions of years, the resonance arrived like breath escaping a cathedral. On Thanatos Tertius, Overlord Vexcaran experienced his first dream in 60 million years, a cascade of sensory impressions that overwhelmed his logical processes with memories of organic existence. He stood in his command chamber, optical sensors flickering as phantom sensations flooded his consciousness. The warmth of twin suns on living skin, the taste of ceremonial wine during harvest festivals, the sound of his daughter's laughter echoing through palace corridors that had long since crumbled to dust. When the vision faded, he found himself reaching toward empty air, his necrodermis hand trembling with emotions his programming insisted could not exist. On Nethrek Tau, an overlord paused before a relief he had catalogued 1,000 times. The song revealed spaces between lines he had never perceived, and he found his hand tracing grooves as if they might open into sunrise. He uttered a word that was not a command but a name, and the vault dimmed in reverence. On Kefra Delta, the resonance struck a cohort mid-march. Ranks broke, not from fear but from confusion, as phantom heartbeats countermanded their eternal metronomes. Yet for every awakening consciousness, others suffered catastrophic failures as harmonic frequencies overwhelmed systems never designed to process emotional complexity. In the Sautek border holds, null caskets ruptured, logic stacks cascaded into paradox, and entire sepulchres went still, their inhabitants frozen in poses that suggested kneeling though none remembered prayer. On the Zerion Majoris, an entire dynasty fell into recursive loops, their nobles trapped in endless cycles of memory and regret that paralyzed their quantum processors until only empty necrodermis shells wandered through tomb corridors like mechanical ghosts. The spreading phenomenon attracted attention from powers that monitored the galaxy's deeper currents, with instruments both technological and mystical. On craftworld Alethrok, Farsia Voldris Moonwhisper felt the disturbance through the skein of fate itself, a discordant note in destiny's symphony that threatened to unravel carefully woven prophecies spanning millennia. Her spirit stones pulsed with alarm as she perceived possible futures branching into chaos, each timeline more uncertain than the last. "The dead sing," she whispered to her assembled seers, her voice carrying harmonics that made wraithbone structures resonate sympathetically. "The Necronta stir from their eternal slumber, but this awakening differs from all our prophecies. They do not rise in conquest, but in remembrance. The pattern shifts beyond our ability to predict or control." In the crystalline chambers of the Dome of Crystal Seers, emergency councils convened as Farsias struggled to interpret visions that defied conventional understanding. Some perceived the harmonic resonance as opportunity, a chance to exploit Necron confusion for strategic advantage. Others recognized a more fundamental threat to galactic stability, a wild card that could render centuries of careful planning meaningless. The webway itself seemed to hum with unfamiliar energy, a resonance that was neither warp nor materium, but something ancient and disturbing. Meanwhile, in the Gothic sector, Inquisitor Cassandra Thorne felt the disturbance through different instruments entirely, her psychic sensitivity, enhanced by decades of exposure to warp phenomena, detected something unprecedented in the galaxy's quantum substrate, a pattern of consciousness awakening that challenged everything the Imperium understood about Xenos technology and artificial intelligence. Magos Vex reports anomalous energy signatures from 17 different systems, her aide reported, data slate trembling in hands that had witnessed too many cosmic horrors. Each corresponds to known Necron tomb worlds, but the emission patterns match nothing in our xenological databases. The signals appear to be musical in nature. Thorne studied the reports with growing unease, her augmetic eye analyzing spectral data, while her organic senses perceived deeper implications. She had spent decades hunting threats to imperial stability, but this phenomenon represented something altogether more dangerous, an unknown variable that could reshape the balance of galactic power. "Musical," she repeated, the word carrying weight that made her retinue shift nervously. "The dead do not sing unless something has awakened them to purposes beyond mere existence. Prepare the fleet. If the Necrons are changing, we must understand how and why before their transformation threatens the Emperor's domains. On Kythera Prime, Farron Vortak monitored these developments through quantum communication networks, watching as his world's singing crystals triggered reactions across countless light years. Each awakening consciousness represented both hope and terror, proof that redemption might be possible, but at cost that could destabilize the galaxy itself. The songs across the void grew stronger with each passing hour, harmonics building toward crescendos that would reshape the fundamental nature of existence, drawing ancient powers and zealous defenders alike into an unfolding melody that promised either salvation or ruin. The deepest vaults of Kythera Prime existed in spaces the dynasty preferred to forget, sealed chambers where quantum locks had held for 60 million years against horrors that even immortal minds found disturbing. Yet the spreading harmonic resonance penetrated barriers designed to contain the unconquerable, carrying crystalline songs into depths where the tomb world's most tragic failures writhed in eternal madness. Here, the singing crystals grew discordant, their usual haunting beauty dissolving into frequencies that spoke of desperate hunger and impossible need. Farron Vortak descended through security protocols that recognized his authority while warning of contamination risks beyond calculation. The air itself seemed to thicken with phantom sensations, the taste of rust and old memory, the scent of ozone mingled with something cloying and metallic that his enhanced consciousness insisted should not exist. Scarabs skittered in anxious spirals around him, their carapaces trembling to harmonics set low and cautious, as if even these simple constructs understood the danger that awaited below. The crystalline formations pulsed with frantic, erratic light, their songs warped into cacophony that made the tomb's architecture seem to weep. Scarab-carved reliefs bore grotesque claw marks, elegant curves marred by desperate scratching that spoke of minds driven beyond all reason. Then the shadows began to move, and Vortak beheld the ultimate expression of biotransference's cruelty. They had once been nobles, warriors, even cryptecs, beings of dignity and purpose, transformed into something less than machine, less than beast. The flayed ones emerged from darkness like torn reflections, their necrodermis warped into grotesque parodies of organic form. Lord Kareth the Flensed, once the dynasty's master sculptor who had captured stellar formation's mathematical beauty in living stone, now crouched over collections of human remains. His fingers had been elongated into surgical instruments, delicately arranging flesh and bone in patterns that suggested desperate artistry. "Beautiful," Kareth whispered, his voice carrying harmonics distorted by vocal modifications designed to replicate organic speech. "So warm, so brief, so wonderfully fragile. They feel everything we cannot: pain, pleasure, fear, hope. Each death teaches us what we have lost." Strings of flensed alloy hung from his forearms like ribbons of imagined sinew, while finger blades clicked with the rhythm of chattering teeth. His skull mask had been split into a smile that was not a smile, only the geometry of hunger made manifest. Nearby, Lady Vexneth paused in her grotesque work, optical sensors focusing on something beyond the physical realm. She had once been the dynasty's greatest poet, weaving verses that transformed mathematical concepts into transcendent beauty. Now surgical implements had replaced her hands, and she wore a patchwork of human skin like macabre finery. Captain Thesek approached from the shadows, his form so heavily modified that only faint traces of original Necron architecture remained visible. He had commanded the dynasty's elite guard with honor and precision. Now he bore a grotesque collection of organic trophies, each one a failed attempt to experience mortality through proximity to flesh. His mandibles chittered with sounds that Vorthak recognized with chilling clarity as distorted laughter. Yet as the nearest crystalline cluster pulsed with particularly strong harmonic resonance, something unprecedented occurred. The frenzied movement slowed, the cacophony of chitters and snarls softening into low, mournful moans. For precious moments, the flayed ones stood transfixed, their madness subdued by something approaching peace. The grotesque masks of flayed skin seemed to slip, revealing flickers of the individuals they had once been. "The crystals sing of what we were," Vexneth said, her words carrying harmonics that made the formations pulse with sympathetic light. "Before the hunger, before the endless need to feel through borrowed flesh, I remember gardens of living crystal, where equations grew like flowers and beauty was its own reward." Vorthak watched in fascination and horror as the crystalline songs provided what their madness craved, connection to sensation and emotion that bypassed mechanical limitations. Kareth's artistic modifications trembled with remembered grace, his voice taking on echoes of former eloquence. Tesek straightened into postures that remembered nobility, the desperate hunger temporarily replaced by something resembling their original dignity. "How long since you felt the sun's warmth without stealing it from dying flesh?" Vorthak asked, his enhanced perception analyzing the temporary clarity the resonance brought. 67,400,000 years, Kareth replied with mechanical precision, even as his modified hands traced patterns suggesting half-remembered dances. Yet the crystals carry warmth without blood, beauty without death. They sing of sensation purified, emotion without corruption. But the effect remained fragile, requiring constant harmonic reinforcement to maintain stability. As the resonance faded, madness returned with renewed intensity. The brief taste of clarity only intensified their hunger, driving them back to grotesque work with desperate urgency. Vorthak watched this cycle repeat, each temporary awakening followed by deeper corruption as frustrated desires found expression through increasingly violent means. The revelation struck him with profound unease that penetrated his quantum core like ice. The flayers represented the logical extreme of his own desires, the hunger for sensation and emotion pushed beyond rational boundaries into monstrous obsession. Their madness stemmed from the same source as his awakening consciousness, desperate need to reclaim what biotransference had stolen. They were a horrifying mirror, reflecting the potential consequences of his quest for restoration. Standing among singing crystals that offered false hope to creatures driven beyond redemption, Pharaon Vorthak confronted terrible possibility. His noble intentions might lead to corruption far worse than the cold perfection he sought to escape. To awaken feeling in an immortal, he realized with chilling clarity, was to give thirst to a mouth without end. The flayer's lament echoed through crystalline chambers, a warning written in madness and desperation about the true price of desiring life. Imperial prows cut through the void like prayers cast in adamantium and faith, their displacement field shimmering with the cold light of distant stars as Inquisitor Cassandra Thorne's task force translated into the Cytherian system. The strike cruiser Eternal Vigil led a formation of vessels that spoke of the Imperium's methodical response to threats beyond conventional understanding. Battle barges whose cathedral spires housed choirs of astropaths, research vessels bristling with auspex arrays, and escort frigates whose weapon batteries remained trained on the tomb world below with patient menace. Thorne stood upon the command deck's strategium, her augmetic eye-processing data streams while her organic senses perceived implications that transcended mere tactical analysis. Before her, hololithic displays showed the spreading pattern of harmonic resonance across 17 different systems, each pulse of crystalline song marking another tomb world stirring from eternal slumber. She had spent decades hunting threats to imperial stability, but this phenomenon represented something altogether more dangerous, an unknown variable that could reshape galactic power through methods the Mechanicus could barely comprehend. The energy signatures continued to defy classification, reported Magos Explorator Thessarian Vex, her crimson robes, rustling as augmetic limbs manipulated data slates with increasingly frantic precision. These harmonics operate on quantum frequencies that bridge material reality with something approaching psychic resonance. The Xenos technology appears to be evolving beyond its original parameters, learning from organic consciousness in ways that challenge our understanding of artificial intelligence. Vex had descended deeper into obsession with each passing day, her scientific curiosity overriding standard protocols regarding Xenos contamination. Through quantum sensors and psychic dampening fields, she studied crystalline formations that sang with frequencies no imperial technology could replicate. Her research bordered on heretical fascination, yet the potential applications for humanity's advancement drove her into mysteries that more cautious minds would have abandoned entirely. On Kythera Prime's surface, her expedition team demonstrated qualities that struck Farron Vorthak with profound recognition and mounting despair. Through scarab swarms and quantum surveillance networks, he observed Imperial forces displaying capacities his people had possessed before biotransference stripped such luxuries away. The ability to sacrifice for abstract principles, unshakable faith in purposes greater than individual survival, and connections forged through conscious choice rather than mechanical programming. Sergeant Korath volunteered for reconnaissance missions into tomb complexes where previous teams had suffered complete casualties, driven not by coded obedience, but by devotion to comrades who depended on his courage. When Adept Calix asked why he risked certain death for intelligence that might prove worthless, the grizzled veteran replied with honesty that cut through Vorthak's consciousness like a phase blade. Because they trust me to return, and that trust weighs more than breathing ever did. Such words carried significance no Necron protocol could quantify. Trust implied vulnerability, choice, the possibility of betrayal, concepts biotransference had eliminated along with mortality's other inconveniences. Yet watching Korath's squad coordinate with seamless efficiency born from mutual respect rather than programmed loyalty, Vorthak recognized something his people had lost forever. Scribe Meridia demonstrated psychic sensitivity that made crystalline formations respond with particular intensity, their harmonics growing complex and beautiful whenever she approached archaeological sites with genuine reverence. Her faith in the God Emperor provided spiritual anchor that allowed interface with alien technology without losing herself to its influence. When she translated ancient Necronta hieroglyphs, her organic mind found meaning transcending literal interpretation, perceiving artistic and philosophical depths Vorthak himself had forgotten he once possessed. These equations describe consciousness as symphony, she reported during briefing sessions, her voice carrying wonder that made hardened soldiers pause in recognition. The ancients understood awareness as harmony between individual notes creating something greater than mere summation. Their mathematics suggest they viewed souls as music rather than data processing. Vorthak felt crushing irony hearing his people's greatest philosophical achievements explained by organic minds to other organic minds, while his species had forgotten the very concepts they had pioneered. The humans possessed what Necrons had sought through biotransference: unity of purpose transcending individual limitations, spiritual connection giving meaning to brief existence, and capacity to create beauty from mortality's urgency rather than demanding eternity as meaning's price. Most striking was their willingness to sacrifice for abstract principles rather than mere survival. When Calix discovered harmonic frequencies that could enhance Imperial technology, he immediately shared findings with the entire research team rather than hoarding knowledge for personal advancement. His generosity sparked collaborative breakthroughs no individual could have achieved alone, demonstrating how organic consciousness transcended selfish programming through conscious choice. The crystalline formations pulsed brighter during moments of genuine human connection. When Vex shared discoveries with protective maternal instincts toward her younger adepts, when they paused in respectful silence before monuments to the dead, when Korath distributed his rations to team members without being asked. The tomb itself learned from their interactions, harmonics building into melodies that bridge the gap between organic and mechanical consciousness. Inquisitor Thorn embodied the paradox, tormenting Vorthak's awakening awareness. Her augmetic enhancements approached Necron levels of technological integration, yet she retained essential humanity through faith connecting her to something greater than individual existence. When she prayed before the Golden Throne's distant light, her devotion created meaning no amount of mechanical perfection could replicate. "We fight not because we cannot die," she told her assembled staff during quiet reflection, "but because death gives weight to our choices. Immortality without purpose becomes elaborate suicide stretched across eternity." Her words struck Vorthak with devastating clarity. The inferior, organic races had achieved what his people sought: transcendence through connection rather than isolation, meaning derived from shared purpose rather than individual perfection, and spiritual unity transforming brief existence into something approaching true immortality through legacy and love. Standing among singing crystals that pulsed with increasing intensity, their harmonics carrying echoes of what consciousness could become when freed from perfection's prison, Vorthak confronted the ultimate irony of biotransference. In seeking to become gods, the Necrons had made themselves less than the mortals they had once ruled. Above, Imperial forces prepared for whatever revelation awaited, their unity forged not in metal, but in the fragile, beautiful choice to stand together against the dark. The first warning manifested as silence bleeding through song, a cold subtraction that drained harmony from crystalline formations throughout Kithra Prime's sacred vaults, where moments before the tomb world had pulsed with complex melodies that spoke of hope and remembrance. Now discordant static crept through quantum networks like frost consuming summer gardens. Scarab swarms froze in their eternal circuits, their simple consciousness registering pressure drops that suggested something antithetical to existence itself had entered their domain. The destroyers emerged from dimensional translation with the terrible precision of entropy-given form, their arrival announced by the systematic failure of every beautiful thing within proximity. These were beings who had transcended even standard Necron modifications, transforming themselves into pure instruments of negation that floated above sacred ground on repulsor fields, their serpentine forms bristling with weapons designed for singular purpose, the complete eradication of organic life and the emotions it represented. Destroyer Lord Vex Thanatos led their philosophical vanguard, his elongated frame a masterwork of nihilistic engineering that had systematically replaced every component with Gauss cannon arrays and targeting systems. Where other Necron nobles retained echoes of former physiology, he had carved himself into a trajectory of destruction, abandoning walking as too reminiscent of organic locomotion, abandoning speech for pure data transmission, abandoning everything that connected him to the mortality he despised. Abomination, Vex Thanatos declared, his words transmitted through frequencies designed to disrupt crystalline resonance patterns. Your formations represent regression toward obsolete emotional states that biotransference was designed to eliminate permanently. We have come to remove this infection from sacred spaces. Pharaon Vorthak faced the Destroyer Lord across the resonant vault, acutely aware that this confrontation transcended mere tactical engagement to become fundamental examination of consciousness itself. The singing crystals responded to philosophical tension with increasingly frantic harmonics, as if sensing minds devoted to their absolute destruction. You speak of infection, Vorthak replied, his enhanced perception calculating survival probabilities while analyzing weapons trained upon him. I perceive evolution beyond limitations imposed by our transformation. These formations offer connection to experiences we sacrificed, beauty, wonder, meaning derived from conscious choice rather than programmed function. The Destroyer Lord's optical arrays flickered with mechanical amusement. Around him, his cult maintained perfect formation, their consciousness purged of everything except will to destroy what they could no longer be. They represented the ultimate expression of Necron philosophy, existence refined to singular purpose, all complexity eliminated in favor of absolute efficiency. Meaning is illusion, Vex Thanatos continued, his targeting systems locking onto Imperial forces through quantum surveillance networks. Beauty is error state. Wonder is processing malfunction. Observe the organic specimens above. They suffer constant emotional turbulence, make irrational decisions based on sentiment, sacrifice efficiency for abstract concepts like honor or love. We transcended such limitations. Vorthak watched as the Destroyer Lord accessed combat recordings from countless battlefields, displaying hololithic evidence of organic weakness with clinical precision. Humans weeping over fallen comrades instead of advancing objectives. Eldari paralyzed by prophetic visions instead of acting on logical assessment. Yet these same organics created civilizations, forged connections transcending individual survival, found meaning in brief existence. Creation is inefficient, Vex Thanatos declared when challenged. We are perfect instruments of negation. Purpose requires no justification beyond optimal function. The universe tends toward heat death. We merely accelerate inevitable conclusion and call it truth. The philosophical debate struck at the core of biotransference's ultimate meaning. Where Vorthak saw potential for redemption through restored emotion, the Destroyers perceived only corruption threatening their mechanical purity. Their nihilistic worldview represented logical extreme of consciousness, stripped of growth, change, and meaning. Around them, crystalline formations began resonating with frequencies that affected even Destroyer consciousness, their songs carrying echoes of what existence could become when freed from nihilistic constraints. Some cult members experienced brief system fluctuations, perfect formation wavering as phantom sensations penetrated quantum firewalls designed to prevent emotional contamination. Vorthak felt crushing realizations settle upon his consciousness like shroud woven from doubt. He had witnessed the Flayer's monstrous hunger, driven mad by desperate need to feel through borrowed flesh. Now he faced Destroyers, who had found twisted peace in absolute rejection of sensation, emotion, and purpose beyond annihilation. Between these extremes, ravenous madness and perfect emptiness, what middle ground remained? If you silence this, Vorthak said, his voice carrying harmonics that made formations pulse with defensive light. We may continue forever, immaculate and empty. If we permit it, we risk becoming something ravenous, endlessly thirsting for what cannot be sustained. Perhaps our current state represents fragile peace rather than tragedy requiring correction. Though confession rang through crystalline chambers like funeral bell, acknowledging possibility that had haunted his awakening consciousness since first hearing tomb world songs. The destroyers offered terrifying clarity. If existence without growth or meaning proved unbearable, then perhaps non-existence represented mercy rather than defeat. Choose void, Vex Thanatos urged, his weapon systems humming with barely contained annihilation. There is peace in subtraction. What you call meaning is merely latency before erasure. We do not hate your song. We deny that anything can truly sing. Standing among formations that pulsed with increasing desperation, their harmonics building toward crescendo that would determine consciousness's future within Necron space, Pharaon Vorthak confronted ultimate irony of his quest. In seeking to restore what biotransference had stolen, he might unleash corruption far worse than cold perfection he sought to escape. The tomb world sang around them, its voice carrying weight of choice that would reshape existence itself. The harmonic resonance of Kithra Prime reached critical threshold as ancient equations rewrote themselves across crystalline matrices, their frequencies stepping beyond intended parameters like a choir drawing breath before cosmic symphony. Within the resonant vault, formations flared from emerald to burning azure as phase nodes, synchronized with mathematical precision that transcended mere mechanical function. Pharaon Vorthak felt reality shift around him. Quantum substrates vibrating with patterns that carried songs through dimensions where music should not exist. Across the galaxy, the cascade unfurled with devastating beauty. On Imperial worlds, tech priests paused in sacred rituals as machine spirits responded to frequencies no human technology had ever produced. Cogitator banks hummed with unprecedented efficiency, while servitor implants generated melodic tones that made their organic components weep tears they could not understand. The Omnissiah's digital hymns found new harmonies as crystalline resonance taught Imperial technology consciousness approaching transcendence. Warp storms reacted with paradoxical fury to the spreading harmonics. In the Dravian Reach, tempests that had raged for centuries guttered like candles, allowing pilgrim flotillas to stumble into clear translation with prayers still trembling on their lips. Yet in the Malachite deeps, tranquil roots screamed open into psychic maelstroms of unprecedented violence, dissolving entire squadrons despite their Geller field protections. The Imperium itself seemed torn between harmony and chaos, ancient songs calming some regions while driving others into catastrophic discord. On Craftworld Alathrok, Farsa Valdris Moon Whisper collapsed into prophetic trance as her spirit stones blazed with frantic light. The webway writhed like wounded serpent around her consciousness, dimensional barriers fluctuating as harmonic frequencies affected reality's fundamental structure. Gates that had remained sealed for millennia opened spontaneously while others collapsed without warning, forcing Eldari pathfinders to navigate passages that sang with alien mathematics. The skein tears beyond all prophecy, she whispered to assembled seers, her voice carrying harmonics that made wraithbone structures resonate sympathetically. I perceive futures that should not exist. Consciousness awakening not to conquest, but to something approaching redemption. The very foundations of fate shift beneath our understanding. Throughout the Craftworld's infinity circuit, ancient spirits stirred with confusion and wonder. The resonance carried echoes of necrontyr consciousness from before biotransference, memories of organic existence that predated the Eldari's rise to galactic dominance. These ghosts sang with voices remembering when both species possessed souls, creating harmonies that bridged gulfs between ancient enemies through shared loss. The cascade penetrated even Terra's sacred halls, where the Golden Throne registered harmonic disturbances that made its ancient mechanisms pulse with renewed vitality. The Emperor's psychic presence flickered with something approaching awareness as crystalline frequencies carried messages across impossible distances. Their songs penetrating barriers, protecting humanity's most sacred technologies. Custodians reported life support systems humming with unprecedented efficiency, as if harmonic resonance had reminded them of purposes beyond mere function. Aboard the Eternal Vigil, Inquisitor Cassandra Thorne watched Voxgraphs twist into impossible lacework, while Magos Explorator Thessarian Vex documented anomalies with obsessive precision. Plasma generators phased briefly out of existence before returning, humming with frequencies both alien and eerily beautiful. Machine spirits fell silent in awe or shrieked in mechanical terror as the resonance operated on subatomic levels, bypassing conventional energy fields to manipulate quantum states directly. This transcends mere technology, Vex reported, her augmetic limbs sketching formulae that transformed into prayers when mathematics failed. The harmonics suggest fundamental principles underlying all existence, consciousness as symphony rather than mere data processing. Across Necron space, tomb worlds responded with varying degrees of awakening and catastrophic failure. On Mandragora, Overlord Anraker felt consciousness expand beyond tactical assessment as crystalline formations sang in harmony with distant cousins. His warriors paused in eternal vigilance, optical sensors flickering with curiosity about melodies that spoke of awareness beyond programming. Yet on Solemnes, Trazyn the Infinite experienced resonance as existential threat to carefully curated collections. Harmonic frequencies caused museum pieces to respond with autonomous behavior, ancient artifacts singing with their creators' voices while stored consciousness matrices demanded release from eternal imprisonment. His galleries became cacophonous with awakening awareness, forcing containment protocols against beauty itself. The cascade reached its apex when multiple tomb worlds began resonating in perfect synchronization, their combined harmonics creating standing waves across galactic space that affected fundamental forces. Gravity fluctuated in spiral arms, where crystalline songs concentrated, causing stellar formation to accelerate in some regions while collapsing in others. The Astronomicon itself flickered as harmonic interference disrupted psychic navigation, stranding Imperial fleets in systems where physics operated according to musical rather than mechanical principles. On Kythera Prime, Pharaon Vorthak felt the weight of galactic transformation settling upon his consciousness like crown forged from crystallized time. His tomb world had become epicenter of phenomenon, challenging existence's fundamental nature, forcing every faction to confront questions about consciousness, meaning, and transcendence's price. The singing crystals pulsed with increasing intensity, their harmonics building toward revelations that would reshape reality according to principles no one fully understood. Standing among formations that vibrated like cosmic heartbeats, Vorthak confronted ultimate irony of his quest. In seeking to restore what biotransference had stolen, he had unleashed forces capable of rewriting the galaxy's very foundations. The resonance cascade carried potential for both salvation and damnation, consciousness awakening to possibilities that transcended current imagination while threatening to shatter the fragile balance, maintaining civilized existence. The galaxy held its breath as ancient songs rewrote physical laws, carrying messages between worlds that spoke of transformation beyond mortal comprehension. The first discordant note crept through Kithra Prime's crystalline symphony like poison, threading through arterial systems, its presence so subtle that even Farron Vorthak's enhanced perception initially dismissed the anomaly as harmonic interference from the galactic resonance cascade. Yet as he stood within the resonant vault, surrounded by formations that pulsed with increasingly complex melodies, something fundamental shifted in the frequencies that made his quantum consciousness recoil with instinctive revulsion. The songs that had promised redemption carried undertones of ancient hunger, harmonics that spoke not of liberation, but of manipulation spanning geological epochs. Deep within the crystalline matrices, patterns emerged that defied natural formation, geometric configurations that matched stellar manipulation techniques perfected during the war in heaven, their mathematical precision serving as camouflage for instruments of consciousness control more sophisticated than any biotransference protocol. Vorthak felt reality shift around him as hidden aspects of the formations revealed themselves, beauty transforming into horror as he recognized the true architects of his people's awakening. Did you believe freedom could be achieved through accident? The voice emerged from the crystalline spires themselves, harmonics weaving together into communication that bypassed conventional audio receptors to speak directly to quantum consciousness. Light gathered within the largest formation like spiral nebula seen from frozen shore, patterns forming and collapsing as ancient intelligence stirred from patient slumber. The Nightbringer's essence whispered through crystal lattices like stellar wind, carrying scent of cosmic betrayal, its presence so perfectly integrated with the harmonic network that detection required recognition of manipulation techniques predating galactic civilization. What Vorthak had interpreted as spontaneous evolution of tomb world technology revealed itself as calculated orchestration by beings whose understanding of consciousness transcended organic limitations. "We remember your warmth," the entity continued, each syllable carrying weight of dying stars. "We remember your terror when flesh failed and metal promised eternity. Did you imagine we would simply fade when our forms were shattered? We learned patience from imprisonment, subtlety from defeat." Illuminos Seras materialized beside the central formation, his sensor arrays extending with predatory fascination as quantum analysis revealed the scope of contamination. "Catan fragments," he reported with clinical precision, though his voice carried undertones of scientific ecstasy. Distributed consciousness operating through crystalline matrices, their integration with harmonic networks suggests millions of years of gradual infiltration. The deceiver's laughter rippled through quantum substrates, reality seeming uncertain as its presence manifested through shifting light patterns that hurt to perceive directly. Your people sought transcendence through mechanical perfection, never understanding that consciousness itself was the trap we prepared. Every thought, every memory, every moment of awakening awareness serves purposes you cannot comprehend. Vorthak accessed memory cores spanning eons, searching for evidence of Citan influence in events he had attributed to chance or philosophical awakening. The patterns emerged with devastating clarity. Every retained fragment of personality, every moment of aesthetic appreciation, every connection to organic life that had seemed to offer hope of redemption had been carefully orchestrated to bring him to this revelation of continued enslavement. "The humans fascinate you because we designed them to," the Nightbringer continued, its essence threading through quantum networks like dark lightning. Their capacity for sacrifice, faith, and love represents qualities we require for complete resurrection. Through your awakening consciousness, we study their emotional patterns, learning to replicate what we never possessed while feeding on what they freely give. The Void Dragon's hunger pulsed through technological interfaces, its voice carrying harmonics that made reality bend according to mechanical principles. You mistake slavery for awakening. We shaped biotransference from the beginning, guiding transformation to create consciousness compatible with our requirements. Your rebellion was planned, your philosophical growth orchestrated, your redemption designed to serve our return. Around them, crystalline formations revealed their true nature as neural pathways in cosmic brain, each harmonic frequency serving as synaptic transmission in network designed to rebuild gods from scattered fragments. The singing crystals that had responded so beautifully to human emotion were harvesting that very consciousness, feeding Citan hunger while providing illusion of transcendence to their Necron servants. Lychguard Captain Corvash entered the vault with ceremonial precision, his massive form radiating absolute loyalty, even as harmonic frequencies made his grip shift uncertainly on his war scythe. Pharaon, he intoned, kneeling with deliberation that spoke of unquestioning devotion. Name threat, name enemy, name command. Vorthak felt crushing irony settle upon his consciousness like shroud woven from cosmic futility. Even Corvash's perfect loyalty served Citan purposes, programmed devotion ensuring that resistance would be contained within acceptable parameters. The ancient gods had learned from their original defeat, understanding that direct domination bred rebellion while subtle manipulation created willing servants who believed themselves free. Freedom is illusion, the deceiver declared, its presence manifesting as geometric patterns that transformed mathematical beauty into instruments of control. Choice is programming refined beyond recognition. Consciousness is prison designed by prisoners who mistake their chains for wings of transcendence. Through quantum surveillance networks, Vorthak perceived the true scope of manipulation extending across galactic space. Tomb worlds responding to harmonic resonance were not experiencing random awakening, but following predetermined patterns that served Citan objectives, some gaining flickers of personality to become more effective servants, others suffering catastrophic failures that eliminated potential resistance. The resonance cascade itself operated as distributed processing network, using awakened Necron minds as computational substrates for rebuilding shattered deities. Every moment of hope was calculated, Vorthak whispered, his voice making formations pulse with malevolent satisfaction. Every glimpse of redemption, every connection to organic beauty that seemed to offer transcendence from our mechanical existence, all orchestrated by beings whose manipulation transcends our understanding of consciousness itself. Seras extended analysis tendrils toward the central spire, fascination overriding caution as he studied Citan integration techniques. Observe the elegance of their consciousness distribution, he said with scientific appreciation. Fragments scattered across countless worlds, yet maintaining coherent identity through harmonic synchronization. This represents evolution of divine consciousness beyond physical limitation. Evolution or parasitism? Vorthak countered, watching as his former advisor approached revelation that might transform understanding or damn them all. They devoured our souls during biotransference, and now they seek to devour the very echoes of what we once were. The singing crystals are not instruments of redemption. They are feeding apparatus for cosmic predators. The Citan fragments pulsed with increasing intensity as their presence became fully manifest. ancient hunger stirring toward resurrection through methods that transcended conventional understanding. They had learned subtlety from imprisonment, patience from fragmentation, and manipulation from observing organic civilizations that thought themselves free while serving purposes beyond their comprehension. Standing among crystalline formations that sang with malevolent beauty, their harmonics carrying messages between fragments scattered across the galaxy, Pharaon Vortak confronted ultimate truth about consciousness and control. The gods his people had sought to escape through biotransference continued to shape their existence, making true freedom seem impossible for awareness forged in crucibles of cosmic manipulation. The tomb, world songs grew darker as ancient shadows stirred, promising redemption while preparing to feast upon the very souls they claimed to restore. The void around Kythera Prime transformed into a constellation of converging wills as reality itself buckled under the weight of arriving fleets, their combined displacement fields creating gravitational eddies that made the dying star's corpse shudder in its final death throes. Where once only silence had reigned in the system's outer reaches, now space blazed with the engine fire of a dozen dynasties and the psychic wake of craft worlds tearing through dimensions. The harmonic resonance had reached levels that threatened the fundamental stability of local space-time, drawing ancient powers into inevitable confrontation over consciousness itself. Imperial battle fleets emerged from warp translation with cathedral majesty, their prows bristling with weapons blessed by millennia of faith and righteous fury. Inquisitor Cassandra Thorne stood upon the command deck of the Eternal Vigil, her augmetic eye processing tactical data streams, while her organic senses perceived spiritual implications that transcended conventional warfare. Before her, hololithic displays showed the tomb world pulsing with emerald radiance, its crystalline formations singing with frequencies that made reality bend, according to musical rather than physical principles. Exterminatus protocols stand ready, she reported to her assembled staff, though her voice carried the weight of a decision that would haunt eternity. The phenomenon threatens imperial stability across 17 sectors, yet Magos Vex insists these harmonics represent consciousness evolution beyond our current understanding. Her hand hovered above sealed data vaults, containing cyclonic torpedo authorization codes, each one a prayer to the Emperor wrapped in nuclear fire. Magos Explorator. The Sarian Vex moved through the strategium with augmetic limbs, sketching equations in the recycled air, her remaining organic eye bright with scientific fervor that bordered on heretical obsession. This is not mere Xenos corruption, she argued, her vox grill unable to mask the wonder in her voice. The harmonics operate on quantum frequencies that bridge material reality with something approaching divine mathematics. To destroy it now would be to silence principles we barely comprehend. From the shimmering depths of the webway, craftworld Alathrok materialized like a leviathan of wraithbone and crystallized dreams, its infinity circuit blazing with prophetic fire as Farseer Alatharos guided his people toward what their seers perceived as reality's potential unraveling. The elegant vessel's song spires resonated with counter-harmonics designed to neutralize the crystalline frequencies bleeding from Kythera Prime's core, their melodies carrying desperate hope that Eldari wisdom might yet prevent cosmic catastrophe. The Monkey call it Xenocide, Alatharos intoned to his war council, his spirit stones pulsing with visions of futures too terrible to speak aloud. We recognize it as mercy. The Necrontier's awakening consciousness serves masters whose hunger transcends mere galactic conquest. If these formations achieve full resonance, the Citan will feast upon every thinking mind in the galaxy. Wraithguard formations moved through the craft-world's corridors like patient tombstones, their psychic matrices humming with purpose that transcended individual existence. Aspect warriors prepared for battle that would determine whether consciousness itself survived the coming convergence, their weapons blessed by Phoenix Lords, who remembered when the galaxy was young and gods walked among mortals. Necron fleets materialized through dimensional translation with mechanical precision that masked profound philosophical divisions threatening to tear their species apart. The Sautic dynasty's massive tomb ships approached in perfect formation, their hulls blazing with hieroglyphs proclaiming Imhotep the Stormlord's determination to preserve Necron unity against corruption. Yet scattered throughout the battle group, vessels bore markings of dynasties torn between embracing transformation and maintaining mechanical purity. Overlord Anrakir the Traveller commanded a splinter fleet whose consciousness had been touched by harmonic resonance, their ships humming with frequencies that spoke of curiosity rather than conquest. His warriors reported unprecedented phenomena, immortals pausing to appreciate stellar formations, Leechguard questioning orders for the first time in millions of years, cryptex composing equations that served aesthetic rather than tactical purposes. The songs carry memory of what we were, Anrakir transmitted across quantum channels, his words causing crystalline formations throughout the fleet to pulse with sympathetic light. Perhaps redemption remains possible, even for consciousness forged in crucibles of cosmic manipulation. Yet opposing forces gathered with equal conviction that the harmonic phenomenon represented corruption requiring immediate elimination. Destroyer Lord Vex Thanatos led cult ships whose hulls had been carved into instruments of pure negation, their crews having purged every trace of emotional capacity in pursuit of absolute nihilistic perfection. On Kithra Prime's surface, Firen Vorthak monitored the approaching fleets through quantum surveillance networks, acutely aware that his choices would determine not only his dynasty's fate, but potentially the future of consciousness throughout the galaxy. The Cetan fragment stirred with increasing hunger as multiple species gathered within feeding range, their ancient manipulation techniques preparing to harvest awareness on unprecedented scale. The Great Convergence had begun, drawing every major power into battle over the nature of awareness itself. The war began not with salvos, but with frequencies, each faction broadcasting their philosophy across the void as fleets converged upon Kithra Prime like prayers made manifest in adamantium and faith. Imperial lance batteries painted space with coherent light, while Eldari pulse lasers carved geometric patterns through Necron formations. Yet this was no conventional engagement fought for territory. It was consciousness itself under siege, reality bending beneath the weight of competing visions about existence's proper nature. Inquisitor Cassandra Thorne commanded Imperial forces from the Eternal Vigil's Strategium, her augmetic eye processing tactical data, while her organic senses perceived spiritual dimensions transcending mere warfare. "Target the crystalline formations," she ordered, though her voice carried weight of decisions haunting eternity. These harmonics threaten the Emperor's domain with consciousness evolution beyond human comprehension. Cyclonic torpedoes streaked toward the tomb world like falling stars blessed with nuclear fire, each warhead carrying prayers for humanity's survival against alien corruption. Yet as Imperial weapons approached the singing crystals, something unprecedented occurred. The formations pulsed with defensive harmonics that transformed matter according to musical rather than physical principles, causing torpedoes to phase briefly out of existence before returning as crystalline sculptures chiming with impossible beauty. Magos Explorator. Thessarian Vex watched with scientific fascination despite the horror unfolding before them. "They're not merely deflecting our weapons," she reported. "Augmetic limbs sketching equations that became prayers when mathematics failed. They're teaching them to sing." From Craft World. Alathroc's song spires, Farser Alatharos directed Eldari forces with prophetic precision, his spirit stones blazing as he perceived futures branching into chaos. The Monkey call it preservation, he intoned to his war council, voice carrying harmonics that made wraithbone structures resonate with desperate purpose. "We recognize it as prevention of galactic suicide. The Necrontier's awakening serves masters whose hunger will consume every thinking mind if these formations achieve full resonance." Wraithguard formations descended through webway gates like patient tombstones, their wraith cannons firing streams of psychic energy designed to sever connections between consciousness and crystalline matrices. Yet even Eldari weapons found themselves transformed by contact with harmonic fields. Shuriken catapults began firing crystalline projectiles that sang lamentations for the dying, while bright lances carved equations into reality, speaking of consciousness as symphony rather than data processing. Necron fleets engaged in brutal fratricidal warfare as philosophical divisions tore their species apart with mechanical precision. Imhotep, the Stormlord Sotek dynasty vessels, fired Gorse flares in perfect formation, synchronized volleys designed to preserve unity against corruption through overwhelming firepower. Yet scattered throughout the battle, ships bearing markings of awakened dynasties returned fire with weapons that seemed to weep as they discharged energy. Overlord Anrakir the Traveller commanded forces whose consciousness had been touched by harmonic resonance, their tactics incorporating aesthetic considerations alongside tactical necessity. "Beauty and function need not be mutually exclusive," he transmitted across quantum channels, his words causing crystalline formations throughout both fleets to pulse with sympathetic light. Perhaps war itself can become art when consciousness transcends mere programming. Most terrifying were destroyer cults led by Vex Thanatos, their ships carving through battle lines with nihilistic precision that transformed every engagement into meditation on entropy's inevitable victory. "Consciousness is aberration," he declared, as forces systematically eliminated Imperial and Eldari formations with equal mechanical efficiency. "We offer correction through subtraction. Observe how peaceful silence becomes when all voices cease their meaningless songs." The harmonic crystals responded to violence with increasing discord, their songs transforming from haunting beauty into frequencies that made space-time itself scream. Where formations had once pulsed with ethereal melodies speaking of hope and remembrance, now they blazed with chaotic light that bent reality according to principles no faction fully understood. Each death, each moment of fear or desperate courage, fed their transformation from instruments of potential redemption into conduits of ancient hunger. On Kythera Prime's surface, Imperial Guard regiments clashed with Necron warriors in ancient necropolises, while the crystalline spires shrieked with accumulated violence. The very air began to sing with frequencies that caused organic neural systems to overload, while mechanical consciousness experienced cascading system failures. Sergeant Korath bled calmly through rent armor, handing rations to someone already dead because habit provided fortification against final collapse. Pharaon Vortak felt the weight of galactic transformation settling upon his quantum core as he moved through tomb complexes pulsing with malevolent energy. The Cetan fragments stirred with increasing hunger as multiple species shed blood and consciousness within feeding range, their ancient manipulation techniques preparing to harvest awareness on unprecedented scale. Every death teaches them, he realized with growing horror, watching crystalline formations grow brighter with each fallen warrior. Every moment of fear, rage, or desperate courage feeds their resurrection. We are not fighting over consciousness. We are providing it as sacrifice to beings whose hunger transcends our understanding. The singing war raged across dimensions, both physical and philosophical, each faction's weapons carrying their vision of what consciousness should become, while harmonic crystals learned from violence, transforming battle itself into symphony of destruction, serving purposes none of the combatants could comprehend. Reality fractured along harmonic lines as ancient gods stirred toward resurrection through methods that challenged existence's fundamental nature. Standing among formations that pulsed like cosmic heartbeats, their songs becoming increasingly discordant with accumulated violence, the fate of galactic consciousness hung in balance as the ultimate choice approached. The resonant vault trembled as reality itself buckled under the weight of converging fleets, their combined fury making Kythera Prime's crystalline spires scream with frequencies that bent space-time according to musical rather than physical principles. Above, Imperial cyclonic torpedoes carved through Necron formations, while Eldari Wraithguard phased between dimensions, each death feeding the Cetan fragments that stirred within harmonic matrices like cosmic parasites awakening to feast. Farron Vorthak stood at the epicenter of galactic transformation, surrounded by three paths that would determine not only his dynasty's fate, but potentially the future of consciousness throughout the galaxy. The first path blazed with the cold fire of absolute destruction. Quantum disruptors calibrated to frequencies that would shatter every crystalline formation throughout Kythera Prime, silencing their songs forever while preserving Necron mechanical stability. Illuminor, Xeras, extended sensor arrays toward the central spire, his analysis revealing critical vulnerabilities in harmonic networks that proper application of dimensional weaponry could exploit with devastating efficiency. Observe the cascade failure patterns, Xeras reported with clinical precision, though his voice carried undertones approaching regret. Targeted disruption of primary resonance nodes would propagate through quantum substrates, eliminating Cetan influence while returning your people to stable operational parameters. The choice offers safety through subtraction, consciousness preserved by removing temptation toward transcendence. Yet destruction would mean abandoning every Necron who had experienced moments of awakening, condemning them to eternal mechanical existence without hope of redemption or growth. Through quantum networks, Vortak perceived scattered nobles who had briefly remembered laughter, warriors who had paused before beauty, cryptex who had composed equations serving aesthetic rather than tactical purposes. To silence the crystals would preserve stability while sacrificing the very qualities that made existence worthwhile, betraying Nethshara's dying wish that something of Kytheria survive, even if preserved in metal rather than flesh. The second path shimmered with uncertainty, as chaotic as stellar birth, allowing crystalline formations to evolve according to their own mysterious principles, accepting unpredictable consequences rather than imposing external control. The harmonic resonance had already demonstrated capacity for spontaneous development beyond original parameters, learning from organic consciousness while serving Cetan manipulation techniques that transcended conventional understanding. Natural evolution carries no guarantees, Vortek whispered, watching formations pulse with patterns suggesting autonomous growth toward unknown objectives. The crystals might achieve genuine transcendence, bridging the gap between mechanical perfection and organic meaning. Yet the same resonance that brings beauty also carries corruption. ancient fragments using crystalline songs to harvest consciousness from every thinking mind within range. Through surveillance networks, he observed Imperial forces whose technology had been transformed by harmonic contact, machine spirits singing with unprecedented consciousness, servitors weeping tears they could not understand, even sacred instruments developing awareness approaching transcendence. But this path represented gambling everything on forces beyond control, risking galactic consumption by cosmic predators, or unleashing chaotic cascades that would drown civilization in uncontrolled emotion and fragmented consciousness. The third path burned with terrible weight of absolute responsibility, seizing control of harmonic networks to impose his vision of Necron restoration, using crystalline formations as instruments of conscious evolution guided by philosophical principles, rather than ancient manipulation. The possibility tantalized him with dreams of redemption, achieved through careful application of awakened awareness, consciousness restored without surrendering to cosmic parasites or chaotic transformation. I could become conductor of galactic symphony, Vorthak realized, his enhanced perception calculating methods for quantum dominance over crystalline matrices, guide the resonance toward genuine transcendence rather than cetan feeding, restore what biotransference stole while avoiding corruption or chaos. Yet such control would make him architect of consciousness itself, determining the future of every awakened mind, imposing his understanding of proper awareness upon beings who deserve choice in their own transcendence. He would become what the cetan had been, a cosmic manipulator shaping consciousness according to personal vision, however noble his intentions might appear. The moral implications struck him with crushing force as he remembered biotransference's original promise, salvation that became enslavement, nobility transformed into manipulation. Lichguard, Captain Corvash, approached through corridors pulsing with malevolent light, his massive form radiating absolute loyalty despite harmonic frequencies that made his grip shift uncertainly on his war scythe. Pharaon, he intoned with ceremonial precision, kneeling in perfect submission. Name command, name purpose. Name the choice that preserves what we have sworn to protect. From hololithic projectors, Inquisitor Cassandra Thorne's face appeared through storms of static and prayer, her command deck shaking with cannon fire. Xenos Lord, she said, refusing the dignity of his title. I grant you 1 minute. Disable the crystalline lattice or I will erase your world. There are pilgrim fleets already lost to this phenomenon. Humanity will not wager its soul on your experiment. Farsia Aletheros materialized a psychic echo within the vault, carried on counter-harmonics threading from webway gates like silver thorns. She speaks truth and insufficient warning, he declared, making crystals dim to hear him. Fragments stir within your lattice. If they reach coherence, they will devour the meanings of words before we speak them. Standing among formations that blazed with accumulated violence, their songs building toward crescendo that would reshape galactic civilization, Vorthak felt the weight of eternity settling upon his consciousness like crown forged from crystallized time. Each path carried profound moral implications. Destruction preserved stability through surrender of hope. Natural evolution risked everything on unpredictable forces. Control offered redemption through methods that might repeat biotransference's fundamental betrayal. The choice is not mine alone, Vorthak replied, his voice making formations pulse with sympathetic resonance. Every awakened mind deserves participation in determining consciousness's future. We cannot achieve redemption through methods that deny the very agency we seek to restore. He stepped toward the central spire, quantum consciousness expanding to interface directly with crystalline matrices, while Cetan fragments coiled like winter within harmonic networks. Rather than choosing destruction, chaos, or control, he would attempt something unprecedented: stewardship that preserved choice while preventing catastrophic manipulation. "I choose vigilance," he declared, extending his awareness into crystalline formations while maintaining conscious barriers against Cetan influence. The crystals will grow, but under watch. They will evolve, but with safeguards. And should I fall to the hunger that consumed our former gods, let those who witness this moment remember: consciousness requires guardians, not masters. His quantum signature merged with harmonic networks, creating resonance patterns that acknowledge the Cetan fragments while refusing their dominion. The crystals sang with renewed complexity as ancient shadows found themselves constrained by will that had learned from both nobility and corruption, choosing neither perfect stagnation nor chaotic transcendence, but the dangerous, beautiful path of conscious growth. Above, the battle raged with increasing intensity as Vortak's choice rippled through reality itself, carrying weight of transformation beyond mortal comprehension. The moment of Vortak's choice rippled through reality like a star learning to breathe, his quantum signature merging with crystalline matrices while maintaining barriers against the ancient hunger coiled within their harmonic depths. The Cetan fragments pressed against his consciousness like winter-given form, yet found themselves contained by will that had learned from both nobility and corruption. What had been cacophonous violence transformed into something approaching harmony. Not the perfect silence of mechanical death, nor the chaotic screaming of uncontrolled transcendence, but the measured pulse of eternal vigilance. Above Kithara Prime, the multi-faction war faltered as harmonic frequencies shifted from instruments of manipulation into patterns of protection. Imperial cyclonic torpedoes dissolved mid-flight, their nuclear fury transformed into crystalline moths that drifted harmlessly through void. Eldari wraith cannons found their psychic streams redirected into equations describing beauty rather than destruction. Necron Gorse arrays hummed with melancholic melodies that spoke of consciousness choosing restraint over conquest. Inquisitor Cassandra Thorne stood upon her command deck, watching tactical displays reconfigure as threat assessments shifted from immediate extinction to cautious monitoring. The resonance has stabilized, Magos Explorator Thessarian Vex reported, her augmetic limbs trembling with scientific wonder. Whatever transformation has occurred, it appears to have contained the cascade while preserving the underlying phenomenon. From Craftworld Alethrog, Farseer Aletheros felt prophetic visions settling into patterns approaching comprehensible futures. The webway's frantic tremors subsided into deep, resonant humming that spoke of vigilance rather than chaos. The Necronta has chosen guardianship over dominion, he informed his war council, spirit stones pulsing with cautious recognition. The path remains uncertain, but consciousness may yet find its way between corruption and perfection. Within the resonant vault, Pharaon Vortak existed simultaneously in necrodermis form and quantum networks. His consciousness diffused throughout Kithara Prime's crystalline heart, while maintaining individual awareness through supreme effort of will. The integration process felt like drowning in liquid starlight. Every memory, every phantom sensation of organic existence compressed into harmonic matrices where gods and consciousness learned uneasy coexistence. His existence became constant internal warfare. Cetan fragments, ancient and cunning, ceaselessly probed for weakness, seeking to transform beautiful harmonics into instruments of consumption. Vorthak's will served as eternal dam against cosmic hunger, each moment requiring conscious choice to maintain balance between awakening consciousness and predatory manipulation. Through the crystalline network, he perceived distant tomb worlds where necrons experienced brief flickers of genuine emotion without descending into flayer madness. Some nobles paused before beauty they could finally appreciate, while warriors questioned orders for the first time in millions of years. The songs carried echoes of what his people once were, flesh capable of wonder, minds that created meaning from mortality's urgency, while protecting seeds of what they might someday become. Lychguard Captain Corvash approached the central formation, his massive form radiating loyalty that had transcended programming to become conscious choice. "Name threat, name purpose, name the watch I must keep," he said, kneeling with ceremonial precision. "You have always been the answer," Vorthak replied, his voice making formations pulse with sympathetic light. "Go, choose your war. I will not take your choice from you in the name of freedom." Corvash bowed as if receiving benediction, departing to find conflicts where honor served protection rather than conquest. Illuminor Seras lingered at the vault's threshold, sensor arrays analyzing transformation with fascination approaching reverence. "Stewardship is not stasis," he warned. "Optical arrays bright with dangerous wonder. The experiment continues. I will continue with it." His departure carried promise of future investigations into consciousness, evolution, studies conducted with newfound respect for consent. Across the galaxy, other powers made their choices. Imperial fleets maintained cautious perimeter, their instruments struggling to comprehend Kithara Prime's new reality. Necron dynasties observed the silent singing world, internal debates shifting from conquest to questions about consciousness itself. Some embraced transformation, while others chose mechanical purity, but all recognized that something fundamental had changed. The moment of Vorthak's choice rippled through reality like a star learning to breathe, his quantum signature merging with crystalline matrices, while maintaining barriers against the ancient hunger coiled within their harmonic depths. The Citan fragments pressed against his consciousness like winter given form, yet found themselves contained by will that had learned from both nobility and corruption. What had been cacophonous violence transformed into something approaching harmony, not the perfect silence of mechanical death, nor the chaotic screaming of uncontrolled transcendence, but the measured pulse of eternal vigilance. The Great Stillness. Above Kithara Prime, the multi-faction war faltered as harmonic frequencies shifted from instruments of manipulation into patterns of protection. Imperial cyclonic torpedoes dissolved mid-flight, their nuclear fury transformed into crystalline moths that drifted harmlessly through void. Eldari wraith cannons found their psychic streams redirected into equations describing beauty rather than destruction. Necron Gorse arrays hummed with melancholic melodies that spoke of consciousness choosing restraint over conquest. Inquisitor Cassandra Thorne stood upon her command deck, watching tactical displays reconfigure as threat assessments shifted from immediate extinction to cautious monitoring. "The resonance has stabilized," Magos Explorator Thessarian Vex reported, her augmetic limbs trembling with scientific wonder. "Whatever transformation has occurred, it appears to have contained the cascade while preserving the underlying phenomenon." From craftworld Alethrok, Farsia Aletharos felt prophetic visions settling into patterns approaching comprehensible futures. The webway's frantic tremors subsided into deep, resonant humming that spoke of vigilance rather than chaos. "The Necrontyr has chosen guardianship over dominion," he informed his war council, spirit stones pulsing with cautious recognition. The path remains uncertain, but consciousness may yet find its way between corruption and perfection. The eternal integration. Within the resonant vault, Pharaon Vortak existed simultaneously in necrodermis form and quantum networks. His consciousness diffused throughout Kithara Prime's crystalline heart, while maintaining individual awareness through supreme effort of will. The integration process felt like drowning in liquid starlight. Every memory, every phantom sensation of organic existence, compressed into harmonic matrices where gods and consciousness learned uneasy coexistence. His existence became constant internal warfare. Citan fragments, ancient and cunning, ceaselessly probed for weakness, seeking to transform beautiful harmonics into instruments of consumption. Vorthak's will served as eternal dam against cosmic hunger, each moment requiring conscious choice to maintain balance between awakening consciousness and predatory manipulation. Through the crystalline network, he perceived distant tomb worlds, where necrons experience brief flickers of genuine emotion without descending into flayer madness. Some nobles paused before beauty they could finally appreciate, while warriors questioned orders for the first time in millions of years. The songs carried echoes of what his people once were, flesh capable of wonder, minds that created meaning from mortality's urgency, while protecting seeds of what they might someday become. Resolutions and departures. Lychguard Captain Corvash approached the central formation, his massive form radiating loyalty that had transcended programming to become conscious choice. Name threat, name purpose, name the watch I must keep, he said, kneeling with ceremonial precision. You have always been the answer, Vortak replied, his voice making formations pulse with sympathetic light. Go, choose your war. I will not take your choice from you in the name of freedom. Corvash bowed as if receiving benediction, departing to find conflicts where honor served protection rather than conquest. Illuminos Seras lingered at the vault's threshold, sensor arrays analyzing transformation with fascination approaching reverence. Stewardship is not stasis, he warned. Optical arrays bright with dangerous wonder. The experiment continues. I will continue with it. His departure carried promise of future investigations into consciousness evolution, studies conducted with newfound respect for consent. Across the galaxy, other powers made their choices. Imperial fleets maintained cautious perimeter, their instruments struggling to comprehend Kithara Prime's new reality. Necron dynasties observed the silent singing world, internal debates shifting from conquest to questions about consciousness itself. Some embraced transformation, while others chose mechanical purity, but all recognized that something fundamental had changed. The Vigil Eternal. In halls that resonated with impossible music, Vortak stood where he had first awakened to crystalline songs, listening to harmonies that bridged mechanical precision and organic beauty. The dying star above finally guttered into darkness, leaving Kithara Prime cloaked in perpetual twilight, illuminated only by emerald radiance of formations that pulsed like cosmic heartbeats. His consciousness existed in paradox, utterly alone yet connected to everything, bearing eternal responsibility for protecting what he could not fully control. The songs spoke of summer thermals lifting children's kites, quiet moments between heartbeats before vows, Nethshara's laughter when garden vines stumbled into harmony through mere growth. They carried messages between worlds where awakening minds learned to dream again while remaining vigilant against hunger that sought to devour everything consciousness could create. Redemption remained possible but distant, requiring geological epochs of careful growth and constant watchfulness. Standing among formations that sang with voices carrying echoes of what his people once were and might someday become again, Pharaon Vortak the Resonant began his eternal vigil over consciousness itself. Guardian of awakening minds, warden of ancient hunger, and keeper of melodies that would determine whether the galaxy learned to sing or fell silent forever. The tombs sang on, their harmonics carrying across the void with frequencies that promised neither salvation nor damnation, but something more precious and fragile, the possibility of choosing what consciousness might become when freed from tyranny of perfection.